What's going on, everybody? So, I don't know if you guys have seen the news yet, but there is something historic going on in Russia right now. As you can see by the headline, Apparent Insurrection in Russia, the Wagner Group, which is the mercenary group of the, Russian military, they were attacked, I believe, about a day or two ago by Russian forces, by artillery and such. They claim they were. There's no concrete evidence, but they said they took a lot of losses and they're done. So they decided to take the city of Rostov on the Don, which is this city right here. They sent all their forces, which are roughly around 20 to 25,000 troops of this Wagner mercenary group. Right? They took control of this city, which is the 11th biggest city in Russia. Right? The Wagner chief, Prigozhin, right, has butted heads a lot with the Russian Ministry of Defense. He didn't call out Putin by name. It's just basically saying that he's against the Russian military of defense. But in essence, Putin is against him now. He says that these are criminal acts, treason, all this stuff. So if caught alive, he is going to go to jail prison for a long time. But for them to do that, they have to stop him. And he's taken a one-way trip up this road to Moscow. And he has covered hundreds of kilometers. And he's not far from Moscow, which is right over here. Reports show that he is somewhere around here. The latest reports show that he's somewhere right around here and moving quickly up this main road into Moscow. Now, this is obviously historic. Hasn't happened in 100 years since World War I when the Russian Revolution happened. So this is blasting on every single news channel. World governments are convening. United States, Canada, UK, all convening emergency sessions. Because, again, hasn't happened in 100 years. And we don't know what's going to happen. We really don't know what's going to happen. So, like I said, he is in this town. I believe it's Yelits, right? Column of PMC Wagner has reportedly passed, and that was 5 hours ago. Now, I've been watching the news, covering a lot of the things. People are projecting him to reach the outskirts of Moscow if interrupted by 1 o'clock, which is in, a couple of minutes. I doubt that he'll get there exactly at 1 o'clock. I'm sure that, soldiers will have to refuel, rest, not rest, but like get food and stuff like that. So it'll probably be between 1 to 3 o'clock in Eastern Standard Time. Oh, okay. So 2 hours ago, first Wagner units have reported reached Moscow region. So they're actually within the outskirts of Moscow. Wow. So that was 2 hours ago. So they could be on the outskirts right now. They could be within the range of Moscow. Now, the thing about it is, I was looking at a couple of control maps and such. This is a really good, this is by the OSINT, which I believe is an open source, nonprofit thing. There's very few Russian units guarding Moscow. There's more air defense units like these guys, which are not going to hold up 20,000 Wagner troops. And these are combat soldiers. These are combat veterans. Like, they've served in Bakhmut. They're not green, right? So these units, I don't think are going to stand a chance against combat troops. At least, one or two brigades of them, right? You do see an infantry unit here, again, but it's an independent rifle regiment. That's not going to hold 20,000 soldiers. We don't know how, if these guys are combat vets. We don't know the level of skill that they have, the experience. And as you can see, there is no other significant force around Moscow. Moscow wasn't expecting this at all. Let me actually open up the... I just want to see your guys' comments so I don't miss them, because this is huge. I've never seen this happen before. Tom Gaming says if that guy gets nukes, we're all screwed. Yeah, probably. Well, I mean, so the thing about it is, we don't know Prigozhin, right? We know a little bit about him. He was a caterer for Putin. He has his own mercenary group. There's a lot of things that can happen. I mean, I could see him, I could see a lot of possibilities. I'm so glad you're doing a stream about this, mate. Whatever happens, I hope it works out for the best for you, Ukraine, and the war ends sooner than expected. Yeah, me too. And that's one thing that I'm kind of hoping for. I'm hoping that he ends the war, or at least calls a ceasefire, right? That he's more inclined to be like, all right, let's stop this. Let's get to the peace table. Maybe even work with the Ukrainian government and work out some kind of peace deal. I'm not sure on the exact amount of force, but I've seen reports of 100+ vehicle convoy. I know it's a lot. Apparently, the reports that I've seen from news, but he left about 5,000 in Rostov, which is a big city, and it's like the transportation hub to feed all the supplies to the Ukrainian front, which is important. I'm surprised no bridges have been blown. That's a great point. Goose Springsteen mentions a really great point there. I'm honestly more concerned about what happens if Moscow falls, what will happen to Russia as well as Ukraine. The first thing I think will happen is, since he's on the outskirts of Russia right now, I can imagine Putin's out. Like, Putin is being ferried somewhere else on the ground by plane somewhere. So I don't think Putin's going to be there. I don't think the Ministry of Defense, the top guys, are going to be there either. I think they're all going to get ferried out. Do it like a government, not in exile, but government in movement. Kind of like the Confederate government moving to, I forgot the name of the town, but, after Richmond fell. But the Wagner Group taking Moscow symbolically will be a huge thing. It will show the instability of Russia. Russians will be like, wow, Putin is no longer in Moscow. Moscow is taken by the Wagner. And Russians do have a lot of Russians do have positive opinions of Wagner. There have been reports that Russians in Rostov-on-the-Don are giving food and water to Wagner forces. So, this is huge. There have been also some reports of some fighting with pro-Putin forces, like civilians that are firing on Wagner troops in Rostov-on-the-Don. So I don't, this is unprecedented, at least in the 21st century, at least in the last 100 years. All of Russia's military forces are here, as you can see by the red. All their forces are fighting the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are doing their counterattack. They're now deploying their majority of their combat brigades that have been trained in England and Canada and the U.S. into action on the southern border. So it's not like Russia could say, all right, let's pull forces out. They can't, right? Ukrainians are attacking, right? So it's not like they can say, all right, let me pull 20,000 forces off. And even if they do, right, moving a military unit takes time, right? There's a lot of logistics that go into it, I'm not an officer, but I know from observing officers and being in, the headquarters company, that it takes a lot, right? there's a lot of logistics. We need to get these vehicles here. We need to get supply here. Like, I know it's a big thing. So it's not like they could just pull forces out. They have to, make sure the fuel is there, make sure the supplies are there, the ammo is there. They also have to plan, like, what routes that they have to take, what happens if they meet resistance. Even if they ferry the troops by planes and stuff like that, that's going to take hours, right? You have to get assets into the area, put the troops on there, and then fly them there. They're already on the outskirts of Moscow. So even if they can get troops within Moscow within now, which is impossible, right, it would still be too late. So the best that the Russian army can do is try to retake Moscow. Hasn't been a battle fought in Moscow since, again, 100 years ago. So this is insane. This is absolutely insane. Let's see what else you guys have to say. I'm honest. Russian government says Putin is still there. I wonder if that's true. There's been reports that Putin has like a number, like 3 or 4 Putin lookalikes, and it's funny, but there are a lot of confirmed reports that Putin sends people that look like him to certain countries and stuff like that. Whether that's true or not, I've heard a lot of reports about that. Don't see a way he's still there realistically. Yeah, I don't see that. I've heard reports that the plane of Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, landed in Turkey. Belarus is definitely somewhere to watch as Belarusian units fighting for Ukraine may try to liberate it. Would honestly be funny if the CIA had their hands in this. I don't know how likely that is, but still funny to think about. I don't think I don't think the CIA has their hands on this, because I think this is just pure Russian craziness. I just think this is pure Russian instability. This is like common in Russia. I mean, you see it in the Russian army from day one. Their invasion of Ukraine. You can see it, like, their vehicles didn't have fuel because they pumped it out and sold it. So much corruption. They didn't have ammo. They didn't have round. They sold everything. The soldiers and officers sold everything they can get their hands on, because there's so much corruption there, right? They don't have the standards like you are in the U.S. military, where, like, you're not gonna find. I mean, if you'll probably find in individual incidents of soldiers doing crazy stuff like that, but I guarantee you, soldiers don't ever think of doing that stuff in the U.S. military, because you're gonna go Fort Leavenworth and chop big rocks into small rocks, and the last thing anyone wants to do is that. So the Russian military is very different from the U.S. military, where that corruption is just commonplace, and they don't have the military leadership or generals like we do, where they develop plans like, hey, what if a military unit or a Chechen unit or the Wagner group decides to roll on Moscow, right? Or roll up on, a key capital or a key resource or a supply depot. What forces do we have there? Like, they don't sit down and think of these strategies like the Pentagon does or the U.S. military does, where they're like, okay, what happens if something happens here? What happens if something happens there? There's always contingencies in the U.S. military. Like, there's plans upon plans upon plans upon plans for everything, So it looks like obviously the Russians don't have that, because they put all their military forces in one place on the border here, which is lunacy, absolute lunacy. I mean, even when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, you had soldiers, units, stateside, right? You had Army National Guard units. You didn't even in Iraq and Afghanistan, we didn't deploy all Army National Guard units, right? We deployed a quarter or half of each state's Army National Guard to Iraq and Afghanistan. And while they were in Afghanistan or Iraq, the other half was either at the civilian jobs or getting ready to deploy. And then while they deployed over there, the other contingent came back. So there was always soldiers here. Plus, you have also state defense forces, state guards, which is basically, in essence, the National Guard Reserve, that are also there too. Russia doesn't have that. And you can clearly see this. It's just absolutely just... This is like very, very historic. As you can see, they're roadblocking a lot of places into Moscow, which, you know, everybody's like, oh, there's a roadblock there. Yeah, and the roadblocks that I've seen on TV, you have wooden, you know, barricades, right? There's stuff that you see during protests, you know, that you can climb over, right? With one police car and one cop like this, like, you're not gonna stop 20,000 combat troops. You might as well just, you know, open it up and, you know, spare his life. But roadblock was in, yeah, roadblock. And then you got these air defense divisions, which again, they're not going to be able to do anything. There's not going to be a lot of them. Now, they have taken some attacks. The Prigozhin convoy here, I believe they were attacked by a helicopter somewhere around here, whatever this town is. And the Prigozhin Wagner group doesn't have air assets. They have APCs and stuff like that. But they do have anti-air assets, and they knocked down that helicopter. This Russian military was just completely taken back by this. Like, there's no way they can... There's no way. There's just no way they're going to stop Prigozhin, I don't think. Even if they take soldiers off the front, which, I mean, you do have some soldiers here, right? Some 11th Army Corps and stuff like that. Even if you put them on a rail and starts heading them up, you're not going to beat that convoy to Moscow. You're not. It's just not going to happen. Yeah, like, you're not going to, I mean, come on. Police forces against 20,000 that are coming your way. It's just not going to happen. Like, you're just not going to be able to hold them. And from what I've read is Moscow's in complete lockdown. Like, they said non-essential workers are to stay home, which basically means they're planning for street-to-street fighting. Air defense, shut down. Oh, that's in Odessa. Yeah, so I think Moscow is going to be taken for the first time in 100 years. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, how is the world going to be? How is the world going to respond to that? It's just shocking, absolutely shocking. Goose says, if it does lead to the downfall of Putin, it would be incredibly ironic. A Wagner convoy taking Moscow and the Russian convoy failed to take Kyiv. Yeah, that's true. If then he said, Tommy says, I mean, Russia's National Guard could come. They have a bunch of them inside Moscow. I wonder what the quality of their National Guard is, though. I'm curious, because I know Russia's military is not as trained as our National Guard. Our National Guard, Army National Guard, basically is the U.S. Army. Like, if you join the Army National Guard, you're going to the same schools as U.S. Army active duty, right? You're going to 11 Bravo school in Fort Benning. I think they still call it OSUT, which is basically AIT mixed with basic training. You know, I don't know what Russia's National Guard does. I don't know if they self-train. And there's a motorized rifle regiment just north of Moscow. Yeah, but it's a rifle regiment. We don't know the quality of them. We know Wagner, combat vets. We know that the ones that he has now are the veterans that he has had for years. that have deployed to Africa and everywhere else. The ones that were prisoners, they were the cannon fodder in the beginning of the war, and not a lot of them survived. I think it's also a question of an initiative. The Russian system encouraged apathy and a lack of independent decision making. Tommy says there's also 6 divisions being refitted near and around Moscow, which can come in. Don't know if they'll help. Yeah, I don't think they'll have the time to do it. The issue also, as well, how well Wagner can hold Moscow if they take it, especially with those 6 infantry divisions around Moscow being refitted after the fighting in Ukraine. If Russia has the same quality of NG like VDV, Wagner wins, and I hope so. You know, the thing about it is, and I see your point, if they do take Moscow, right, obviously Putin's going to be long gone. MOD is going to be gone by then. But the symbolic symbolism of taking Moscow, that will alone go into history books. But also, it's going to be on Russian TV. Right, I can see Prigozhin going into Russian TV networks, right, and which are basically state media controlled assets. I could see him sending troops there and saying, "Hey, we have Moscow, we have this. The Russian government is in exile. Putin is no longer in Moscow." I mean, he could be issuing that statement straight from the actual, whatever you call it, the capital of Russia, the Red Square, and that is going to do a lot of damage to Putin, in regards to even endangering his life, because Russians are going to be like, wow, like Putin lost control of Russia. That's the first thing they're going to think is Putin lost control of Russia. The capital is gone. Rostov-on-the-Don is gone. And he might not, and Prigozhin might not stop in Moscow. He might go to Leningrad as well. So in the minds of the Russian people, this might be like, okay, that's it, right? And there are reports that Russian military are they're in some ways either allowing this to happen in certain cases, and in some cases actually joining Wagner. And we all know there's a couple of cool YouTube channels where you can find, I forgot the name of the guy. I'll put it in the description after the video finishes. But there's a YouTube channel where they monitor Russian soldiers calling back home, and how every single Russian soldier, even officers, are saying how bad the military is doing, how they're not getting food, how they're not getting ammunition, that this war is just horrendous. Just call after call after call of this, right? Like, just complete demoralization along the entire front. So to the Russian soldier, if there's a possibility of like the war ending, or at least a ceasefire, I could see them saying, all right, that's it, we're not following MOD, we're done. I don't know how all that's going to play out. I don't know how the sequence is. But when you have a demoralized army on the border that does not want to fight, that does not have the food, logistics, ammo, anything like that, Putin, Moscow is taken by the Wagner Group, and a lot of Russian soldiers look up to the Wagner Group as like elites. That plays a lot. That could topple Putin completely. I wouldn't be surprised if Putin disappears within the next couple of days. It's going to be very interesting how that plays out. Putin should honestly get a peace deal with Ukraine. Yeah, I highly doubt that. I think Putin is just off the deep end. I think he's lost his mind. I don't think Putin's ever going to be... If he does a peace deal, he's done for because it would be like a defeat in essence. Everything he's been saying to the Russian people, that they're gonna win, that they're gonna that Ukraine is gonna be theirs, is all gonna be like, hey, we couldn't do it, and to them, the power of Putin is just gonna dwindle. Historical Nerd says, I can't imagine a Russian army in Ukraine can keep up the fight now that the rear supply lines are completely blown thanks to WAGs taking the logistical hubs. I heard from the BBC that, I don't know why, but apparently Wagner is not affecting the supplies moving through Rostov-on-the-Don. There was a BBC, either BBC or DW News was reporting that they're not interfering with the supplies, which is a little... I wonder why, and it's a little bit of a concern. If they're not stopping the supplies, it could be for a couple of reasons. It could be that Prigozhin wants to be the next Putin and continue the war his way. It could be that maybe he wants to have the supplies continue to the Russian army and not be blamed for soldiers not getting food and ammo and stuff like that, so he can be sympathetic to the Russian army. Major Tom says, how likely do you think it is for the Russian army to switch sides? I think at this point, with all the stuff that all the audio stuff that I've been seeing off the channels and stuff like that, a lot of people, especially the mobilized, drafted troops, do not like what's going on. Like they hate being on the front lines. Putin has done what they did in World War II, where you have multiple lines of trenches. So you put the draftees in the front line and the basically active duty Russians on the second line. So when the draftees decide to retreat, they get shot down. So obviously the morale for that first line is not going to be good. And even the active duty troops are just bits and pieces of what they originally were. So I could see this spiraling away from Putin very quickly. Belarus just announced that they're mobilized and are heading to Wagner units. Yeah, but the Belarus army is just garbage. It really is garbage. I think they have, is it 10 to 15,000? And a couple American generals and some British generals were saying that they have about 10 to 15,000 active duty. But out of those 10 to 15,000, the ones that can be quickly deployed are around 4 to 5,000. Again, even if you deploy those 4 to 5,000, you're looking at 20,000 combat vets. These guys have been in Bakhmut. They've been in heavy, heavy fighting. You're going to take 5,000 soldiers that have not been in combat against a larger force that has seen combat. And then also you have to transport them to Moscow. So again, they're not going to get there in time. They might be there for a counteroffensive to take Moscow, but yeah, it's not going to be good. They can't affect the supplies because they can't hold the supply lines. They only have 20,000 K or men or so and need to get to Moscow. I know they left about 5,000 in Rostov-on-the-Don. 20,000 roughly are on the way to Moscow. They might be garbage, but reportedly 155,000 men can do some damage. Belarus can risk losing any regime-loyal troops. They almost were overthrown by factory workers 3 years ago. Yeah, I know that Lushenko is in a really bad spot. You know, he's been fighting with Putin to stay out of the war, right, for quite a while. You know, he's been trying to literally stay out of this war for quite a while, being pressured by Putin to send his forces in. But his forces are not going to make any difference. They do have better equipment than the Russians, because Russians are using T-62s, in some cases T-52s, and I've heard some reports that they're considering T-34s. If you guys are not familiar with the T-34s, those are World War II tanks. So very old tanks, and obviously Belarus has newer ones. But I mean, think about it. Even if you put them on a rail, and Russians do have one of the best rail systems, it would take a while to get there. At least a day, if not a lot of hours to get into those areas. And then they would have to set up, like, they can't just get there and then attack, right? Um, you're going to have Prigozhin take Moscow, set up actual military fortifications, right? Defensive positions. It's going to be a slogfest. Moscow could possibly be like a Berlin in 45. You're going to have 20,000 combat vets, right? They're going to slug it out with elements of the Russian army and Belarus army, right? Which the Belarus army is not going to be much. But think about it. They're going to have to pull actual combat vets off the front line. How many of them are loyalty is going to stay with, like how many of them are going to be like, do we really want to attack our own Russian soldiers? I mean, these are Wagner guys. These guys, that they're looking up to, the Wagner troops, right? We're now going to fight them. How many of them are going to be like, yeah, we're not doing it? And Russia at this point already has entire units that are refusing to fight. There have been reports over the last couple of months that Russia had soldiers in this area where they were like, we're done. We're not fighting. We're not going to the front. We're not getting supplies. We're not getting food. We're not getting paid. They're already having problems, severe problems with morale. So then taking them off here and then redeploying them to Moscow, right? And then setting up battle plans to take Moscow. I mean, Moscow is going to be in ruins after this. And just the sight of TV crews showing battles happening in Moscow, that's going to reverberate not only through Russia, but throughout the whole world. People are going to be like, wow. Like, Moscow is being torn apart like Berlin was in 45. And then also you got to figure out how many troops can they pull from the front. Ukraine is putting in their 5 combat brigades with Leopards, with Abrams, with not Churchills, but Crusader tanks, right? They haven't been fully engaged yet. They are now going in fully, right? As you can see here, they're now putting in all those combat brigades into those pockets. So they really can't pull any forces from here, right? So that leaves this area. But then again, Ukraine also put in 1 Western trained brigade into this area. So you really can't pull people off here. So where can you pull people off of? Maybe here, but if you pull troops off here, Ukraine can just redeploy forces and break into here. It's really bad for Russia because there's only a limited amount of soldiers they could pull from the front. And they would have to redeploy them to take their own capital back. And then you got to ask yourself, what is the Russian public going to do? Right? I think statistics I saw is 5 to 10% of Russians have firearms. Apparently in Russia, owning a firearm is very difficult. But 5 to 10% of Russians own firearm, at least on the books, right? What are they going to do? Are they going to, how are they going to sway in this? Are they going to support Prigozhin? Are they going to back Putin? It remains to be seen. This has never happened before. And it's not like Prigozhin is this, George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or, good person, right? Like, he's technically a war criminal. So is Putin. So how does that work? It's not like it's not like the NATO or the West is going to reach out to Prigozhin, and maybe they would, but they're gonna have to give him immunity. There's a lot of factors in play, and I'm very curious on how the U.S. government is seeing this and some of the scenarios they're rolling out. Um, yeah, it's very curious how this is all going to play out. Uh, Honestly, and I know Ukraine does not like Prigozhin. They hate Wagner, obviously, because of the fighting at Bakhmut. But there's an old saying that enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? I wonder if Ukraine reaches out to Prigozhin and says, hey, listen, we'll support your efforts, right? We will attack along the entire front. We'll attack Russian rail in areas leading to Moscow or leading to areas that will affect you. Let's work together. In exchange, we do a ceasefire. We end the war. You give us back, all these possessions, including Crimea, and we'll give you a clean slate. We'll just, we'll call it, and that's it. Technically, you will be command of Russia at that point. I wonder if Ukraine is considering that. It'll be very interesting to see how that works. Major Tom says, I follow many private channels, and if possible, Belarusian population will remove Lushenko as soon as possible. Yeah, there's a big... That's why Lushenko is very worried about it. I don't think he's going to get involved as much as Putin's going to hope. I think Lushenko is smelling blood in the water. Lushenko and Putin don't like each other. In the beginning they did, but their relationship soured in the last 10 years, very much so. Again, I don't see how realistically Wagner will hold Moscow. They'll eventually be starved of supplies. Yeah, but there's a lot of supplies in Moscow. I could see Wagner troops raiding, supermarkets, which at that point makes the Russian population in Moscow started to starve. Yeah, you're right about that. The only reason Lukashenko exists is because of Putin. Wagner has gone all in on Moscow, hoping that the population will support them, and from the videos, the movement seems to be right. Yeah, I do feel that way. If he gets Moscow and the nukes, we are screwed. That is a very interesting... I don't think if he gets to Moscow, like, he automatically can, go to a certain desk and say, all right, got the nuclear codes. I think, I don't know how the Russian stuff is done in terms of how they're releasing nuclear weapons. But I highly doubt that even if he gains certain military silos, that he'll launch any nuclear weapons. I don't think he would do that. I think he is going to try to look at this as, I want to run Russia, right? I want Western support, right? I want to be identified as the new leader of Russia. I think he's going to make overtures to the West and say, hey, listen, I'm going to end this war. War is over. We lost too many people. The war is over. I have a feeling he's going to do something like that. Reports of 170,000 guard are around Moscow. 170,000. I haven't seen reports of that out of their reported 500,000 National Guard. I haven't heard any reports of that. Some of the British generals and military leadership have mentioned that there is literally sparse military units in and around Moscow. The British generals were saying that majority of all Russian military forces are in Ukraine or along the borders with with Finland, and in this area. They also deployed forces in Belarus. So a lot of them, think about it, they never projected this to ever happen. So it's not like they were going to keep a division or a core around Moscow for what? You know, there would be no purpose. You know, like we don't. I don't think in the Russian mindset they were ever thinking this would ever happen. So I don't think they have that many troops, and I think maybe their National Guard is a different interpretation than our Army National Guard. Our Army National Guard, you have to get certified just as a 11 Bravo in U.S. active Army, right? Like if you're 11 Bravo, like I said, you're going to Fort Benning, you're going through OST training, and then you're going back to your unit. I had one of my guys who, Silla, I remember his name. He joined the Army National Guard. He went to 11 Bravo school, Fort Benning, and during the drill weekends, he says it was tough. You're basically doing exactly what 11 Bravo Army active duty troops are doing, right? So the Army National Guard is not like, you know, some untrained force. They are fully certified just like any other Army active duty Army Army soldier. The Russian National Guard, I don't think they have that. I don't think they go through the same schools as the Russian army, which, by the way, their schools are a lot worse than ours, just to begin with, right? I think their National Guard is, hey, let's meet every month, we'll shoot some weapons and roast some kibasi. I think that's a Polish thing. We'll drink some vodka and stuff like that. I think they're just civilians in uniform, in essence, with little to no discipline. So even if they do have 150,000 mobilizing this area, and think about it, mobilizing is not quick, right? Like I was in the State Guard, and you know, and also with like National Guard, when you mobilize, it takes hours for that to happen, right? You just don't mobilize like that. Prigozhin is two hours ago. He was on the outskirts of Moscow, right? So let's say they started 3 or 4 hours ago. Let's say somewhere right around here, which was, let's say, 4 or 5 hours ago, they decided to mobilize this National Guard if he does have 170,000 in this area, which I doubt. But let's say he does. And then they call them up, right? First thing, you have to call them, right? Or, I mean, I would see the Russians probably going on TV saying, hey, we need everybody part of the National Guard to show up at these locations, right? That's going to take time. You're going to have to go back to your house, get your uniform, get your weapon, head to your, I don't know if the Russians have armories, but National Guard has armories. You would show up at the armory, right? You would have your officers start doing head counts, getting logistics. I mean, all this takes time. For an Army National Guard unit now, if you mobilize an Army National Guard unit now in the U.S., right, it would take up to 24 hours. You can get some within 8 or somewhere around a couple hours to show up, and maybe you could forward deploy them. But generally, it takes about up to 24 hours for an Army National Guard unit to deploy. Even if they can get a couple of people in, what defenses can they make within an hour, right? And then again, training-wise, they're going to be nothing compared to combat vets, right? These guys are going to be the ones that are like, they know how to shoot a gun. That's it. They might know how to clear a room. Maybe. Right? Versus 20,000 combat vets of Wagner that are going to go in and they know how to clear rooms expertly. You know, they know how to go in and just take care of business, flanking, all these other things. If they do put thousands of these militia on the streets, they're going to get slaughtered, like really badly. And they're going to be demoralized. You know, you're going to have strong leadership. You know, if you have an officer in this, I'll call it a Russian militia because I don't think they're National Guard. I'm not going to even give him the title of National Guard. By the way, the National Guard, do you know how they got their name? Marquis de Lafayette, on his trip to the United States, was doing a tour, I think, of D.C., and he says, your troops are a great National Guard of the United States. That's how they got the name. So I'm not going to give that respect, that honor to the Russian National Guard. I'm just going to call them a militia. I don't think they can handle that. You know, you have to trust your officers. You have to know that your officers know what they're doing, right? And if you don't have faith in your officers, I'm telling you, the morale drops, right? And I've had some officers that I was under the command of that I was like, oh my gosh, dude, seriously, holy crap, this is not good, this is not good. You know, but then I had some officers that, you know, come to mind that are like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. If this happens, we're going to go there. Does everybody understand that? Yes, sir. All right. And I had some officers going like, all right, well, if we go there, then if something happens, I guess we can come back here. And then, you're hearing them because, scuttlebutt, right? You're hearing them and you're like, dude, this guy, so I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Tom Gaming says he's crazy. He'll do anything to revive Russia. 170K. How will Wagner defeat that? Even if they're poorly trained, Wagner won't be able to do that. Honestly, 20,000 against 170,000 militia, I would put my money on the 20,000. Because the 170,000, which I highly doubt there's 170,000 there. But let's say they can mobilize half, which I don't believe those numbers. But let's say he can mobilize half of those militia. They're not going to have armored vehicles. They're not, right? They're going to have AK-47s. They're going to have very old weapons, low amount of ammunition, probably poor leadership, poor logistics, poor command and control, right? And they're going to rout. They're going to rout like running like never before. Against, first time they're going to see an APC and a tank coming up, they're not going to have RPGs. So they're going to be like shooting the tank and the APC with small arms fire. It's not going to happen. They might have a few, anti-tank weapons, maybe. Again, Russia is probably never projected this ever happening. So these key assets are not there. This is too fast. This is too fast for any military unit not within Moscow to respond to it. He's called the Butcher of Syria, yeah. Wagner is in negation right now. They currently haven't moved in an hour or two. Oh, really? Hold on. He'll say he'll kill himself, but they says Leslie will lose. So there's negotiations already. If the United States wanted to, a window of opportunity has opened. That has not occurred since World War II. Yes, yeah, but besides, Russia's war strategy has been scorched earth for 300 years. They're going to loot Moscow for sure. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Wagner just quit. Oh, let's take a look. Oh, wow. Okay, 2 minutes ago, Wagner boss published a new audio recording Saturday claiming he was turning his forces around from a march toward Moscow. We are turning our columns around and going back in the other direction to our field camps. Wow. Okay, the announcement comes as the Belarusian government claimed Lukashenko has reached a deal with Wagner boss to halt the march of his forces of Moscow this morning. Putin briefed his Belarusian counterpart on the situation. The head of the state agreed on joint actions as a follow-up to the agreement. The president of Belarus has been additionally informed of the situation through his own channels and an agreement with the president of Russia held talks with the Wagner PMC Prigozhin. Statement continue. You again see Prigozhin accept the proposal of Preller to stop the movement of armed personnel of Wagner on territory of Russia. Steps to de-escalate. Wow. Wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it just popped up 2-3 minutes ago. Well, I guess that changes things. Just a little bit. Wow. 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 I will say this one thing. That's the end of Prigozhin. This is not something Russia's going to forget. This is not something that Putin's going to forget. Whatever deal that they honored, Russian deals is as thin as paper, you know. Easily, you know, what was it, a couple of weeks before or a month before, Russia was like, we're not invading Ukraine, and they invaded Ukraine. So Prigozhin, this was a really bad deal, choice on his part, because him heading back to his camps, right, after doing this whole thing, basically means that, one, he's going to end up missing in the next couple of days and found later in a ditch somewhere. He's not going to survive this. And then the Wagner group is going to be completely dismantled, and a lot of arrests are going to happen. The Russians are not going to forget this. This is an embarrassment for Russia worldwide, and examples will be made. I don't know what they told Prigozhin to accept this, but that's the end of Prigozhin. We're not going to see him. I don't think we're going to see him anymore after this. It's not going to be right away. I think it'll probably take a couple days, couple weeks maybe, but then something's going to happen. He's going to fall out of the news, and they're like, oh, by the way, this person that was in a ditch was... That's insane. They're going away from Moscow now. Wagner just released a message. Wagner is standing down. It's on the news. They're surrendering. They negotiated. They're done. Still, he didn't surrender. He just gave up on Moscow. I said they negotiated. Yeah, it looks like I don't know how Lushenko got him to turn around. If he surrendered, yeah, Tom, you're totally right. If he surrendered or accepted his deal, that's it for him. Reddit says he didn't accept, and it's a lie. I don't know if it's on CNN. I hate that everything's paid. What's a free site? NBC News. NBC. Yeah. It's all over the news. Yeah, you're right. It's done. He says he's on the outskirts of Moscow. Seemingly abandoned armed rebellion. In order to avoid bloodshed. Dude, you have no idea. You know, there's an old saying, you know, with Julius Caesar crossing the Rhine, not the Rhine, crossing that, I forgot what the river was. But, you know, when he crossed the river, he said the die is cast, right? The die was cast. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to go back across the river. The die is not cast anymore. You know, you can't do that. Once you started toward Moscow, that's it. There is no going back. And apparently, he's going back. And this basically means that's the end of the Wagner Group. That's the end of Prigozhin. That's the end. Yeah. I mean, there might be lip service for a couple of days, but I guarantee you Putin right now is going to be like, let it be calm for a couple of days. And then I have a feeling that's what's going to happen. Yep, Tom Game saying Wagner would be dissolved. Without Wagner, Russia loses the war. You know, Wagner is a tough unit, but Russia does have some strong forces, active duty forces that can still hold their own, especially in this area. They're fighting hard, and they're taking heavy losses. Man. And I know, you know, honestly, I think this is a really stupid thing for him to do. He just ended Wagner and, in essence, him. But this could have been so great for Ukraine. This could have ended the war much sooner. I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he did that. I really can't believe. I'm still like in shock that he did that. I'm hoping. I'm hoping he's lying and that they're still going to Moscow. But now their forces are heading back to Rostov-on-the-Don or in these areas here, because this is where they were based. Now the war is just going to continue with, you know, Ukraine fighting tooth and nail here. Hadn't they continued to take Moscow, it would have pulled forces from this front, and it would have caused a ceasefire, or at least Ukraine making breakthroughs, significant breakthroughs like they did in Kharkiv last year. But dang. I was so hoping this was going to be such a positive step for Ukraine, that this was just going to allow Ukraine to make dramatic leaps on the battlefield, rout entire Russian armies. Dang. Damn. There's no going back for Putin. The Russian people already saw what happened. Bribes. Yeah, I have a feel maybe bribes had something to do with it, Tom. Wagner honestly didn't do much in Ukraine. They can still win without them. I wanted to see the Battle of Moscow 3. Tom, the whole Battle of Moscow 3. Me too. Yeah. Well, it was an interesting attempted coup. And we will see what's going to happen with Prigozhin in the next couple of days. We'll probably see him around for a couple of days, and then not. But, yeah, that's it. That's the end of the Russian coup. I don't know what will happen after this. I don't think it's going to affect... I mean, it will affect Putin's stability, his what do you call it, standing a little bit. It's going to slice off a little bit of stability of his government. I don't think a lot. Yeah, I don't think a lot. I think the war will I think the war will continue as is. Wow. And not only did captured all these facilities, he had an opportunity to make significant change and end the war, or destabilize Russia to the point where Ukraine could have won this war, or at least made dramatic gains on the battlefield. And honestly, Putin and Prigozhin are both bad guys, but one is nuts. We know one is completely nuts. I don't know about Prigozhin. The stuff that he has done in the past is evil. But I had a feeling that, if Putin doesn't want to come to the table, maybe there was a chance Prigozhin could come to the table. But now the war is going to continue. All right. Well, that's it, guys. Man. It was a good ride, comrades. Yep. It was a good ride. Alright, guys. Well, I'm going to end this. This was, I was going to say this was going to be historic. This is going to be more of a footnote now. It is what it is. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's going to be a footnote in history. Maybe a line in the textbooks. That's about it. If that. Alright, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I'll have more content coming up for strategy gaming today, tomorrow, and the next day. Please help support the channel. Still unemployed and still interviewing for jobs. So if you want to see more content, please help support the channel. There's like a thanks button on the bottom. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this. Catch you next one. See you then.